Hey everybody, it's Brad Montgomery. I've missed you. Oh, you are in luck today because we're talking to one of my absolute favorite people, a very close friend, an expert in difficult questions in almost any category you could possibly think. She's a rock star speaker. She's one of our nation's best. Please say hello to Jessica Pettitt. Jessica!
Oh, hi.
Thank you for joining me. So you and I have done this before, and we talked about difficult conversations around LGBTQ, AI plus,
Look
and
at you.
I
Good job.
and I said, hey, I don't know about that one, but so we just thought we'd do like a part two and catch up on some other stuff.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm going to check and make sure that my camera is doing correct. Yes, it is. Okay, great.
All right,
Perfect.
so we were talking offline and through texting a little bit about J.K. Rowling,
Yeah,
and
lots to talk about there.
yeah, so I want to talk about J.K. Rowling as an individual because you've kind of found a smoking gun I didn't know about. So let's
Hmm.
talk about that. But also, I want to talk about the bigger concept, which she caught shit from some people for saying, I just said that bad word. Dang it.
It wasn't me.
I've never said that word in the past before. She caught a lot of flack, and so has Dave Chappelle for saying I should be allowed to say a trans person was formerly of a different sex than they currently identified. And so I want to talk about if you're allowed to have those conversations first, but or as well. Can you catch us up on J.K. Rowling and why? Like, where are you on the whole controversy? She's pretty unpopular with a lot of trans people.
Yeah, well, not just trans people, but queer people and allies to trans people. So let's back up just a second. So there's a woman called J.K. Rowling, and she wrote a lot of books. Mostly, you might be familiar with the Harry Potter series.
No, 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 no.
And so,
Not familiar. Not familiar. I read all of those books out loud to my children.
yeah, well,
So
I'm
I'm
I'm just
unabashed fans of Harry Potter, like crazy
yeah,
fan.
yeah. I wanted to back up just in case someday somewhere we get a listener, and a watcher, and they're like, "Wait, who? What's going on?" So a very good friend of mine, who I do like is part of my chosen family. He had never heard of Harry Potter, and this was like in the last year. And I was just like, "Honey, you got to get out of the barn." So I bought him the whole series, right? So I am similar in Star Wars land. I have seen them. I enjoy them. I have read the Harry Potter books and I have seen the movies. I can't quote things. I don't do spells on people. I'm not a super obsessed person, but I really, really enjoyed these books. And I really also notice that I feel as an old person, I feel like there is a generation that is far more reading than could be, right? Like I feel like it brought people back to reading, and I have a deep, intimate relationship with each book. This is the first time, even in my adulthood, that I would like go at midnight and stand in line for the next books. Like I experienced
Yeah.
that. And I also know that there's like younger people who are like, stop talking about Harry Potter already. It's so old. Like I am with my Gen X movie references, right? Like I get that this is like a niche, not for everybody. So okay, so J.K.
My
Rowling
kids,
was
my kids are in their 20s, and it just felt like this was for them,
mhm,
like for them and a little older. Like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
reading them as they came out. And by the way,
yeah,
I have a very strong memory of going to our neighborhood pool and seeing all these adults reading I can't remember the name of it, but one of the books had a blue cover. And I'm looking
yeah,
around at all these adults had just come out there. So pretty mass appeal. But yet the author,
yeah.
maybe she's in trouble right now.
So currently, what she is being drawn attention to herself and to other people, and like the New York Times is supporting her, etc. So what is happening is she has stated some things that were interpreted as transphobic or potentially homophobic. So meaning you're not allowed to transition. The birth sex that you were assigned is who you are, and the rest of this stuff is not real. Those are all kind of like transphobic tropes, right? homophobic, you're not allowed to be gay, certainly not allowed to be trans. Let's not tell them that you can be trans and gay. That's a whole different um so
this is this is why you're my favorite friend.
oh quiet. One thing at a time, Jessica. So she has stated some things, and a lot of people who are in the spotlight, if they say something, they might say that they misspoke, right? Or that they were speaking out of ignorance and didn't know what they were saying, but they have received education now and are aware what they said was harmful. Maybe they even apologize. Usually it uses the word if it was
Right.
offensive to someone, which is why I have job security. So, not this case. Oh no, she like doubles down. And what's fascinating is that from what I remember, and I will shut up in a second and let you talk, is that I remember it being very controversial that one of the main characters was perceived as gay in her mind. Dumbledore, of course, was a gay man, and people were like, what? Right? And when you were reading the books as they came out, like, I have always been Team Snape. I am House of Slytherin. I am totally fine with this. So then that was a controversy itself, is that people could be loyal and do things out of loyalty that might not look like they're on the good team, right? So what is fascinating to me is that you are like, she's writing characters that have rich histories that are deemed irrelevant, like someone's sexuality, whether or not they're a principal of a school, or where their loyalties actually lie, may also be so loyal that they look like they're a bad guy because they're actually a mole for being a good guy. So these complicated people are characters of the book. But none of that seems to actually transpose onto humans who have sexual orientation or sexual identity different than heterosexual, or don't identify as trans or non-binary. They must then be what the word we would use is cisgender, because cis is a Latin prefix that means congruent. So you have to be raised and identify, once you have a sense of agency or an adult, as the same thing. There are no other options.
Can I
So
stop here?
boxed her into transphobia. So there you go, Brett.
We fly over some of this vocabulary, and I'm there almost. Cisgender is
I was trying to
like
do
Leave
baby.
It to Beaver. See, if cisgender is TV we grew up with, a boy is a boy and is straight. A girl is a girl and is straight. Right? Non-cisgender is not that.
You're conflating things. So just to do a review, it's a triangle, right? So there's three different things that often get smushed together, but they're three distinct things. So when you are straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, that would be your sexual orientation or your identity. When you are masculine or feminine or androgynous, or non-binary or trans, that would be your gender, which is usually wrapped up in gender roles, how one identifies their own gender, how they express their gender. And then sex, which Governor DeSantis has decided is the act of having sex. In this case, we mean anatomy, chromosomes, biology, hormones, biological bits and pieces, or giblets, as I like to refer to them, is sex. So if someone is cisgender, like both of us, we both identify as cisgender people, then that means our internal and external physical bodies actually align with being male or female. In this case, we are one of each. You get to guess which one. And the level of masculinity or femininity that we have would be our gender, but our sex would be in alignment. So cisgender means that those things are pretty congruent, but that doesn't necessarily mean straight.
So can I be cisgendered male and be gay?
You sure can.
Ooh, all right. Well, we should ring a bell. Brad just learned something. Ding, 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 ding.
Ding, ding, ding.
I stopped you because you're intimidating to me.
I'm wearing cute overalls. I was trying so hard not to be intimidating. Look how adorable I look.
This language is so easy to you, so you're describing this heavy stuff with J.K. Rowling, and I got stuck on the vocabulary. So I kind of feel like I interrupted you.
If you want, it's totally fine. And if you'd like to intimidate me, you're a parent. I'm not that brave, right? So
Well,
this is
frankly, it wasn't that hard.
that's it's hard enough that it scared me away. That's all I gotta say. All right, so with J.K. Rowling, and then now the New York Times doubling down.
But that was just, to be fair, that was one opinion author.
No, there's like 8 different articles where
Oh,
they've said like we're standing behind this.
I only saw read one, so shame on me. I saw
No,
in the opinion section, one person said J.K. Rowling deserves a break.
yeah. So there are more articles like that. It's pretty. I'm very surprised that honestly, for no other reason, and now this is going to be a controversial thing to say. I am very surprised that the New York Times didn't balk at any pushback from its readership. Protecting its journalist, I think, is its job. Like, I'm fine with that. But that because we're so fragile around being canceled, I think a lot of institutions and people and famous people don't actually just name what their core values are. And so then they get challenged and they immediately like fold. And so what is happening is that it appears that the New York Times is saying one of their values is to not honor that androgynous, non-binary, or trans people exist.
What? I didn't read that article. I read
Well,
where
it's not an article that states this is how we feel, but it is what readers are interpreting by standing behind the journalist. Okay, great.
Well, I mean, I only read one article. You said there's several, but the article I read said, "Hey, we went through some of her statements, and it doesn't seem as bad as she kind of caught a bunch of flack for." They
Good
did
job.
not say anything about our opinion about trans or androgynous or non-cis
No,
or
no,
whatever.
they're not coming out saying this is what we stand for, right? Like another organization is standing neutral on this. But what it is doing, or at least what the readers are interpreting, so this is where I think things need to be more talked about, is that I think readers are interpreting the article that you're referencing of like, look, this isn't warranting the biggest backlash.
Yeah.
They are now, the readership are interpreting that as siding with J.K. Rowling, and now the entire newspaper is transphobic and everybody should cancel their subscriptions. I think that's a little much. I do think that it would be lovely if the New York Times stated what it believes in, and even if it just believes in protecting its journalists for having opinions on diverse things, that would be fine, but it's not doing that, and it's downplaying what readers are saying is transphobic. That's just that's not helping. That's trying to make the problem go away.
So I might have missed something that you're hip to. I suspect you know that the trans community is freaking out about this, about the New York Times, and I didn't know that. Is that right?
So I wouldn't say that just the trans community. I would say kind of like
Oh,
liberals
sorry.
who are
Allies and
liberals who are trying to do all the right things all the time so that they don't look bad, also have not really identified what they do or don't believe in. And so a lot of, like, I'm going to make some liberal people very upset, but a lot of liberal people that I have talked to think if they cancel, they're not consciously saying this, but it's annoying to me because it's in the same buffet line of thoughts, is that if they cancel their New York Times subscription, then they are not going to be associated with transphobia. But who you subscribe to does not cure you from transphobia. You have to actually do work around when you are or are not being transphobic. That has nothing to do with newspaper subscriptions. But a lot of times we take, and I talked about this summer around cancel culture, we take these very easy kind of virtue signals of like, we're never going to eat at this place again, or we're never going to do this. We're going to cancel our subscription because it will absolve us from a problem instead of just addressing that this problem is part of our lives.
I get that. Does it seem significant to you that these were opinion pieces in the Times and not news pieces?
I don't think so, because I don't know that most people can identify. I don't know that people actually, ironically, read enough to know the difference between an opinion article and a journalism article, because I don't know that people actually know what journalism is anymore. Because
You're such a skeptic.
well,
I
we've
read the
like,
Times on an iPad, and the opinion pieces in big word, not a little word, big word. It says opinion at the top of all
yeah,
of their opinion pieces. It's
yeah.
pretty hard to miss.
I think that it's very hard to discern between clickbait news, journalism, and opinion pieces. I think it looks like somebody wrote this, and then the the place that published the thing that was written
Yeah, I get that.
stood behind the person who did the writing, and then now people have their hair on fire.
Well, I think what happened with me personally, my friend, is that I love Harry Potter. I mean, like, it's such a big part of our family lore. And then J.K. Rowling is in trouble, and then I see this headline or article that says maybe J.K. Rowling is not in such big trouble, and I was attracted to that because I don't want to, because I like Hermione. Come on, Ron, these are my guys.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a term called confirmation bias,
Yeah.
and you can use it in a lot of different contexts, but you want to like J.K. Rowling, so
Yes, I
you're going to
do.
try and find something that says, "See, I can like her. This is good." So when I gave you a new Easter egg about J.K. Rowling, you were like, "What? We have to get on a podcast." There's something going on that if I'm looking for confirmation bias that this woman is problematic, then I'm going to write another story about this new thing that I located. And if I really want to like her, then you're going to find confirmation bias of reasons to like her. What I would like to point out, I believe that we are intellectually capable of loving Hermione and knowing that the author is a fallible human being. Like
That's a
we
whole nother
could,
podcast because, like,
I
that's
know,
like, can you love the art and not the artist? I can't handle. I grew up with Bill Cosby, and I can't handle listening to a single thing he does now.
yeah. I mean, and stand up specifically would not be what it is today without his work. The work that he did on records and actually being able to mass produce comedy that people could then use outside of a bar would not be the same without him. And he's done some pretty despicable things, it seems.
Uh, I'd say more than it seems. Back to JK.
Yep.
Confirmation bias. So you sent me this Wikipedia article on Robert Galbraith Heath. I read it again before we came on. Tell tell our listeners what you found.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the problem, right? So, Brad, you messaged me and said, "Hey, can we talk about this?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I'd love to. That'd be great." So then that night, or maybe the next day, I am in a TikTok hole, like everybody is, I know these days, because I'm writing a new book and I need to like dental floss my brain so that I can go to sleep. So I'm watching TikTok. And there's a TikTok that says, "I understand that we're worried about J.K. Rowling being transphobic. Here's a fun fact that I really think we need to be talking about that we're not talking about." So I just want to point out that I learned about this on TikTok, but then here's where I'm weird. I Googled it
Mm-hmm.
and read my own research to find out if this factoid was correct. And it seems to be correct from what I was able to find. I didn't just trust a TikTok and like light my hair on fire. I did some research and took some Pepto Bismol. And now here we are. So
Yeah,
Richard Gold,
to let them know, I'm looking at a Wikipedia article, but it has a ton of citations on it.
yes, yeah, I did like the actual research, and so I just gave you the Wikipedia one
Oh,
so you could have
thank
it all,
you.
so that you'd be like, "What?" all at once, right?
Well,
So
tell us what it says.
yeah, so it turns out that J.K. Rowling also published works of art under more books under a pen name or a pseudonym, and the name that was picked was a man's name. We could have a whole conversation about why a woman would have to pick a man's name as a pen name. Well, that pen name, and then I don't have it in front of me, but Robert
Robert
Goldbraith.
Galbraith. She use all three names? Robert Galbraith Heath.
No, no Heath. So Robert Galbraith is
Galbraith.
turns out is J.K. Rowling's pen name. So then there's an article about new science that actually was able to determine this in about 30 minutes based on the writing of the books, and you can like actually kind of reverse identify who the authors is. She also has said, yes, that is her name. That is important because I also wanted to see, did she say yes to this? So she's like, yep, that's my pen name. And no, I didn't know the history of the pen name. Well, it turns out that just by random coincidence, the random men's name that she picks to be a pseudonym happens to be the inventor of conversion therapy. So, again, if you are looking for confirmation bias, that
conversion therapy is the belief that you can take, for example, gay people and work on them and fix them and make them not gay.
Through electronic shocks.
Yeah.
Yes. So conversion therapy has been deemed illegal in most places because it is actually torture. And a whole nother podcast, we can talk about like elder gay people who have survived conversion therapy and now are terrified to get any kind of medical care because they have PTSD from medical treatment from conversion therapy in their childhoods. That, of all the men's names in the whole universe, that's the pseudonym that she picked. So is she homophobic? Is she transphobic? Is she really needing to do a Google dive before she says something or picks a name? All of these things are possible, and you can still like Hermione.
Again, I'm biased, right? So I'm kind of clawing my way into this, or maybe I'm trying to claw my way so I don't get into it. She's picked the first name and the middle name. She didn't pick the first name and the last name.
Sure.
It is damning, isn't it?
I mean, technically, I wouldn't call it a middle name. I'd call it like the first part of a hyphenated last name, but sure.
Well, it's not hyphenated. I'm looking at the article you sent me. It's a first name, middle name, last name.
All right. Well, I think in other ones it's been hyphenated, but I think it's a double last name. I think. I don't know. I did not research that, but I would have to do that research before I declare factoids. That is what I'm suggesting. Yeah. So that obviously is going to add fuel to the fire of people who are ready to absolutely boycott this person. And it is also important to mention that we do this with money, whether we're talking about political ideology, voting, or what. We're supposed to protest and march with our dollars and our time.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have spent a lot of time with these books. And there's a lot of money being made off of the Harry Potter enterprise. And so then is that time and money investment supporting transphobia and or potentially homophobia is now the predicament that people are in.
I'm still I just want to believe that maybe she didn't. She picked Robert Galbraith, but a lot of these articles are titled Dr. Heath, R.G. Heath. Heath is a prominent name in this guy's world.
Sure.
And she left that off.
And if you did any kind of thought pattern before picking it, maybe Jim.
Right.
Right? Like, yes, maybe that was some thought process. Maybe there was zero thought process. And I think there's actually an article that interviews her and she's like, I just picked some random name.
Yeah.
So let's go with it. Let's say it's a random name. It's like the street she grew up on as a child and her first dog's name, right? Like, right. Okay, that sounds fine. So then, I don't know, throw it into Google and just see, did this person mass murder anyone? No, they just created conversion therapy. Okay, let's pick our second pet and our second childhood street, right? Like,
it seems messed up.
This is the key piece, is any of this could be intentional. It could be intentional. Now that it is known, what are we going to do about it?
Well,
And
right. That's what I was going to say. Is she could have said, like, oh, heavens, I don't want to be associated with that guy. I picked the wrong name, dang it.
right. But so she didn't say that. She was
Right.
like, oh, it's just random.
Yeah.
Because she's already dismissing charge number 1, and so now she's dismissing charge number 2. And if confirmation bias is like, see, these things really are just like weird happenstances. Like,
Yeah.
she
Okay.
didn't even pick the Heath part. Like, we're just making a mountain out of a molehill. If you're doing the confirmation bias of this woman should be blasted off the planet, then this was not good news.
Yeah. Interesting tidbit. I don't know if it's related, but I went to go visit. We went to go visit my daughter who was studying in Edinburgh, and this is our oldest. She is the one that is most Harry Potter crazy, and could not wait to take us to the cemetery that has all these tombstones, which apparently J.K. Rowling picked names off of them because they're. I can't remember all of the I can't remember any of the characters, but definitely Potter is there, and there's a whole bunch of characters where you see them on the gravestones. You're like, ah. So that portion of me just wants to believe that it is random. But yeah, this is pretty damning. And having her not come out and say, oh, I accidentally picked Adolf Hitler for my pen name and I shouldn't have done that.
Right.
That seems like
right. Like, I have friends that live in an older house in St. Paul, and it has the original tile in the mudroom between the front door and the door that gets into the house. And on the original tile are all of these swastikas.
Oh, that's awful.
The original swastika was a Buddhist symbol for like peace and tranquility, and it was I think we could say co-opted into something very different. But the original thought was that this would provide peace and tranquility by basically genocide in the entire world, right? So I think we can say co-opted, misappropriated, right? So now in 2023, when you walk in the door, you have to like walk over like a whole bunch of swastikas to get into their house. And it comes with an explanation, right? Is that like let me tell you that year the house was built.
Right.
These are the original tiles. And then we had this whole conversation, like, do they immediately buy like a rug? Or is it original to that? It's original to the house. Were the people Nazis? No, actually, it was built more than likely by a Buddhist practicing family.
That is
right?
so easy to me. Pull the tile, paint it over,
Right.
do something.
Right, one would think, except it's original to the house and
I
everything
know,
else
but
in the
who
house.
wants to explain that to your friends? Like, no, it's like.
Right. So my point is that things can evolve and change, and you can take responsibility in the moment. So then they know anytime somebody comes to the house for the first time, they're going to have to explain the floor in the mudroom.
You're so fun. Let me. Can we? I want to step back from this. We're in the trees with one individual, J.K. Rowling.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to back up a little bit. She and Dave Chappelle said, like in the best way to hear this, I think it would be like this. There is a difference between somebody who was born a man versus somebody who now identifies as a man. And I think that's what Dave Chappelle, and that did not go over well. So forget Chappelle and forget J.K. Rowling. What's wrong with that concept? Why is that so? Like, why am I going to get in trouble for saying that?
So I don't necessarily think that people are going to get like wildly in trouble for saying these things if they were saying them at face value without any other historical context, right? So I think that's an important thing to state. Now, what I mean by that is because so many people do not have good, clean intentions, then someone with good, clean intentions has to go up against the reality of people being very disrespectful of how someone currently identifies or feeling entitled to someone's history, even though you wouldn't necessarily feel entitled to that history if someone else was different. So why it's considered invasive is that when you asked me to be on the show, you didn't ask me what my genitalia looks like. You didn't ask me what my birth name was. You didn't ask me what I used to be. You just run with who I am now, right?
Yeah.
But that's great. And then if I were to identify as something that you didn't know, you might be like, wait, time out.
Yeah.
We got to back up. What? Because you thought you knew stuff, and I just informed you that you don't know everything. But now people feel entitled to know the stuff that they now know they don't know. And so the idea is that if you're not going to ask every human being this information, then why are you only asking it? And honestly, you're asking it because it's novel, because you're not familiar with it. It makes that person very different. And in this case, that person is trying very hard not to be different. They're trying to be who they are.
Yeah.
And not who they were assigned at being. So they don't want to be different for you. They're very aware. So then it's for them and not for your consumption. That's the tricky line.
We're hearing so the real key is context and history.
Yeah. So, well, I'm going to throw myself under the bus for a second. So there's our old dog sitter. Our old dog sitter's friend. They all came to visit, and I couldn't remember the friend's name. And I think this was the first time I'd met the friend. Maybe it was the second time I'd met the friend. I don't remember. And the person is, frankly, androgynous. And so I don't know how they quote unquote started. I don't know who they are now. I don't know what their whole journey is. We're having dinner, right? Like, it doesn't even matter, but I don't know. So at some point in time, I misstated the person's name. And I'm going to be really honest again, I can't remember which one's right and which one is wrong. So I either said Cameron or I said Carmen. I think I said Carmen and their name is Cameron. I can't remember. And so the person got really offended because I had misgendered them at the table. Now, in my world, I didn't misgender anybody because I don't even know what their gender identification is. I just mispronounced their name that I barely knew. So I was
you
like,
didn't just mispronounce it because one of them is a masculine name, one of them is a feminine name.
Possibly, right. But I mean,
it's not like you said Cameron or Cameron.
I wasn't in my universe. I was not thinking I need to say the girl name or I need to say the boy name. I just mispronounced the person's name because I couldn't remember it. That is what actually happened.
This story is fantastic because it would put me in an epileptic fit to be in that situation. So I can't wait to see how you handled it.
Yeah, well, just because I'm good at this doesn't mean I handled it well. So then the person was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you, of all people, just misgendered me. And I was like, oh, what? I'm sorry. And they were like, you just called me whichever name I said. And obviously, I must have been Carmen because they said, obviously, that's a girl's name. My name is this. And however it is they actually pronounced, because I don't think it was Cameron, whatever name it was, I still don't know if this person identifies as more masculine or more feminine, non-binary, androgynous. I don't know how the person identifies. And even now, years later, it's still bothering me. And I can't remember what the person's actual name is. And in the moment, I screwed up. And in a way that I screwed up, it landed on them that I was misgendering them, which it doesn't matter that I was just mispronouncing the name or misremembering the name because I don't even know what the gender is to know that I made a mistake. Does that make sense? Doesn't matter. To them, I misgendered them. And so then immediately I say, oh my gosh, I'm very sorry for using the wrong name. I did not say for mispronouncing your name. I said using the wrong name. I don't even know what I actually said. But to take responsibility for it is they heard me using the wrong name that then meant that I was misgendering them. And my job is to take responsibility for messing up. So I said, I am sorry. Now, here we are 47 years later. My job is to know this person's name, and I still don't know this person's name. And I haven't gone to dinner with them again. But if we ever do have to go to dinner with them again, I'm going to have to do my homework. But I'm consciously going to do my own homework to get it right. Not to mention that names are fluid, and by the time we were to go to dinner together, they may have a completely different name.
Well, let's class. We're going to learn from Jess. let's say that thing happens tomorrow, right? So a person comes in, they're androgynous, you don't know their name or their sex, and you guessed wrong and you've misgendered them. Knowing what you know now, how would you handle that?
So now, if I knew I was going to go out to dinner with them, I would say, and because I specifically know, one, I screwed this up, and two, I went on Facebook and didn't find my answers, I would ask, I can't wait to go to dinner tomorrow. Before we meet up, can you remind me what name and pronouns you are using? And I probably would do that to the dog sitter and then ask for any guests that are joining dinner. And then my job is to memorize that information. And then luckily, I got a wingman. So I'd be like, Lauren, names, pronouns, got it, on it. And then in theory, if we're doing this and I screw up again, Lauren should be the person to correct me, not the person who I screwed up. Because then he's fixing me and being an ally to the person that I screwed up.
Lauren's your husband, for anyone that doesn't know.
All right. Believe
But
it or not, I got married. Can you imagine?
I can. I'm changing the rules of the story. Let's say that happens, but there's no chance to prepare because you're surprised. You didn't know you were going out to dinner with an androgynous person, and you don't know their name or pronouns.
Okay. Then
So
you
they
ask
say, "Hey, I'm mad. You hurt my feelings because you misgendered me."
right.
Now
So
what?
then in real time, you would just say, hi, I'm Jess. I use feminine or she, her pronouns. What's your name? What pronouns do you use? And then your
Oh,
job
you
is
do
to
that
complete that
proactively.
information. Yeah. Well, and also you notice I said my name and my pronouns because then people who are not confused are confusing to other people, if I should say it that way. They don't really have to go around making an announcement of what pronouns they use because people guess correctly. So then that's why, like, for someone like me, having it in my signature or at the bottom of my Zoom screen or something is I'm normalizing the one, what is a pronoun? And two, which ones I prefer to use. So then everybody gets to share that information, not just the person people can't guess correctly.
My head exploded just a tiny bit.
Okay, back up. Let's do it again. So, like,
Well,
Brad,
no, I get it, but I'm just picturing at me in that situation. Okay,
yeah,
there's something going on here. It might be gender or identity, or I don't know what's happening, and I think I would panic a little bit. Like I don't want to hurt. I don't want to do anything that would be painful or hurtful. But I didn't consider that the way to out of this is to proactively say, "I'm Brad. I go by he and him. What's your name and what are your pronouns?" That
right.
that my head exploded a little bit.
Totally cool. But this is a perfect example of like what ally work is, right? So the reason why your head likely exploded is that people probably guess correctly you use masculine pronouns. I'm going to go with always,
Yeah.
right? So then you've never had to explain something that other people figure out,
Yes.
right? At the beginning of this, before we hit record, you shared with me that your daughter is a vegetarian, your wife is a pescatarian, and what was the word you used for you?
I'm a reducitarian, which means I'm reducing my.
Reducitarian.
I eat fewer animals
Right.
to save
So
the planet.
and that's better for the planet is to pay attention and eat less meat. I'd never even heard of that word before. So you
It's
got
a new word to me. I love it.
that's great. So you got to share what you are. You also shared information about your wife and your daughter. So then I can like file that away. So then let's say for some reason you're in the middle of nowhere and you're at my house and I'm about to make you dinner. Somewhere in my head might be an alarm of like, you need to ask them if they eat meat because I remember somebody doesn't and I can't remember if they're coming to dinner or not. Or,
Yeah. This
or it's
metaphor
just
doesn't hold.
yes, it does. Because I could also, if I have to cook for someone, is just ask, are there any dietary restrictions I need to know about? And then it gives you an opportunity and anyone I'm going to cook for to tell me what their dietary restrictions
All
are.
right. I got that
Right?
one.
Yeah. See. So when we get to names and pronouns, what ends up happening is we never share this information. We never ask this information because we don't have to, because we're used to people guessing, right? until we run into a Cameron Carmen situation, and then we're like, whoa, what's going on over here? And then we feel all good about ourselves because we remembered to ask that person. But then that's treating that person differently. So the idea is just to allow everyone the space to normalize that not everyone knows everyone's name. Not everyone knows everyone's pronouns. So just provide that space, especially as someone who never is guessed wrong, because it doesn't cost us anything to say, I'm Jess, I use she, her pronouns.
Well, maybe we should step it up. Like, so let's say I show up at your house with somebody who is androgynous, and you don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying to that person, "Hi, my name's Jess, I go by she and her," you could, or what if I have two guests? So I have somebody, or it's just me. You don't know me either. So you say it to me first. Hi, I'm Jess. What? Then I say I'm Brad. I'm he and his.
Mm-hmm.
And then you give a little more cover, and you're a greater ally to that person who we're trying to not make feel crappy.
Right, because it just becomes kind of normal. Yeah.
I feel like I'm trying, and I'm honestly, if you ask me generally, how are you doing on social culture issues? I'd say like I am very hip. I am very modern. I'm very great at this. And then I talk to you and I just feel like my grandparents.
Well, so here's why that is probably accurate, and you should also give yourself a break, right? Is that none of this is new. It's been around forever, and it seems new. Like, it is not new, and it seems new. And so, like, bringing it into your level of consciousness is like a new activity. So I didn't know what a reducitarian was. Oh, what an interesting concept. No, I don't want to reduce nothing, right? But I didn't know what the word was. Now I know what it is. Now I can form an opinion about it. Okay, great.
Yeah, but
I'm
that
very
one is just not loaded like gender or sexuality or.
But that's just because we've politicized gender and sexuality in a way that we haven't politicized eating. Although, if you want to ask a vegan, they are going to say that it's
right.
right? So that we can politicize anything, as proven in our society, and very few things have been politicized as heavily as sex, gender, and sexuality. And largely, then it's a different workshop, but that's about like heteronormativity and like what's expected and what's not expected, and whether the Venn diagram works with religion or doesn't work with religion, which what we really mean is Protestant or Catholic Christianity, right? Like, that is a whole different workshop. So what I would challenge you, Brad, is like, it feels new because you have purposely become aware of something that you didn't know about.
Well,
Great.
I mean, I understand this is not new. But also, I remember the day I was made aware of some of these, like cis and non-cis, and there was a whole vocabulary lesson in one art installation.
Right. But
My
so
head just went, what?
but Brad, this is what's important. And if anyone actually watches this is what I want to say, is that in theory, this is like my topic area, right? Like, I'm good at this. But I can walk around Pride and not know what some of the words mean. Or like, there are now flags that mean different things, and I am very invested in the old flags, right? And so then I have to be like, what does this mean? What's going on? I'm not new to this information. I'm new to the current information because I am my grandparents, right? Like, I in here, I will forever be perpetually 20 unless you listen to me get up out of a chair. Then all of a sudden I've become an old person. But the reality is that I don't know what I used to not only know, but I used to be like at the cutting edge of things. Right? So like, the example that I use all the time is that when I had a real job, I was like the Star Trek of the office. I was in charge of the server. I was in charge of the copy machine and the fax machine if something went wrong. But I haven't had a job since 2004. So my technological Star Trekky skills stopped at fax machines. And so now I have 3 remote controls, and when I can't get them to work, we're going to read a book. I don't know what's going on. I can't find it. I just give up. But compared to my partner, I'm very techie, and compared to a dog sitter that we would have who's like a college student, we don't know anything. I
Yeah.
feel cool that I have a television mounted to the wall.
All right, we're going to answer a question from Rich Hopkins.
Oh, can't wait.
Let's see if I get this. So here's Rich Hopkins. I'm going to read it for you because most of our listeners are listening audio only. Discussions with my daughters, who are all LGBTQ or of one type or another, and my son, who's straight but part of today's culture of understanding. Oh, dang it! It went away. The new world, understanding of the new world of gender identity. It's come up that we're all somewhat non-binary or a little bit gay, and it's just a spectrum of how much, which then affects our choices. Thoughts or any lack of sensitivity to this question is ignorantly intentional? Oh, I get it. Sorry. No. We got it. Rich, you're asking a fair question, and you're asking the right person because Jess is great at this. Are we all a little bit gay?
So as a reminder, because I said this at the beginning, our biological and anatomical bits and parts is one point in the triangle. Our gender is one point in the triangle, and our sexuality is another point in the triangle. So if we're playing shapes, let's also think of just a basic bell curve. So they're littler on the ends and bigger in the middle. So most group dynamics fit into this kind of bell curve, which would mean most people do not fall into the extremes, but that everything has extremes. So then if we take hyper masculinity and we take hyper femininity, most people are floating in the middle. If we take hyper heterosexuality and hyper monosexuality would be the word, then most people float around in the middle. Same thing goes with masculinity, femininity. So then if that's the case, then, and I'm going to make people's heads explode, but there's like a lot of research that shows that there are all different kinds of interests and forms of expression and desire, fantasies, actual interest, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. So most people are actually floating in the middle.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me, that we're on a spectrum. Some people are going to be at the extreme, but mostly not.
Right. I mean, if I can, I think you and I are an excellent example. You identify as a cisgender man. I identify as a cisgender woman. I am a pretty masculine woman, whether it's my communication style or my general energy or something. Like, I'm pretty masculine. And I would imagine that you are probably not going to be a newsflash to you, but you are not hyper masculine, Brad.
Oh, that's it. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're Yeah, you're right.
Right. Like, I mean, in communication, there's masculine and feminine communication that has nothing to do with gender or sex. But the idea is like being listening or being passive is referred to as feminine communication, because that's how sexism works. And being like super bold and loud and taking up a lot of space is considered a more masculine way of communicating. And I have been at the same table with you, and you're a much better listener than me. That doesn't make you a woman, and it doesn't make you gay. It does make you someone who has more feminine communication patterns than I do.
Back to Rich's question. I think the part that is interesting to me, and Rich, I'm right with you. The last thing he said was, any lack of sensitivity in this question is ignorantly unintentional. Rich, I think that question is exactly the right question, and it seems like all of us ought to be talking about that stuff more.
Yeah. Well, and it speaks to like the eggshells of people wanting to word things correctly because you're really legitimately curious and you're wanting to actually have a conversation about this. And if you say things wrong, suddenly everyone's canceling their New York Times subscription.
Yeah. Rich says, thanks. Thanks. I wish I'd been willing to discuss this and understand it 10 years ago. I'm with you, buddy. I wish I even knew some of these words 10 years ago. All right. Miss Jessica. Are you not Jessica? You're Jess?
Depends. Mostly Jess, though.
Mostly Jess.
But never Jessie. Look, see, such a great example. You have to ask me, right? I'm never a Jessie. Jessica is like, legal documents, and Jess is what I prefer. You didn't know
it always comes down to asking, right? It always comes down to asking.
Allowing yourself to be curious. This is what I find so funny. I would not have a job security if people just listened to the illogic motion. If you are interested in being curious, you have to fundamentally know that you don't know everything. So then if you don't know, you now know you can ask a question. But we feel entitled to know things because now we are aware that we might not know everything that we thought we knew. But what I would remind people is that there are some things you don't know, and it's not socially acceptable to ask of anyone. So don't treat people differently, right? Like,
there's so much. There's so much I want to talk to you about. Like even that sentence, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of something I want to talk about. We are out of time though, but would you be willing to come back and let's talk about, because it's always in the news. There's always an article in the news.
Yeah, this is what I think. Rich and anybody else listening, I think what you need to do is give us topics. And then Brad and I can hash them out and talk about what we think. Maybe we'll even disagree with each other. That'd be very exciting.
Oh, I can't wait.
And I know. Let's do it. Let's schedule a bunch of these and then pick some different topics and figure out what people are interested or intrigued in.
Yeah, I think we're a good match for each other because I'm open to learning, but I also feel I feel 57. I feel like a white 57-year-old guy in the suburbs.
But you are a white 57-year-old guy in the suburbs who's willing to have a conversation about stuff that you don't know. That's a pretty big difference.
That's because I'm awesome.
I know. I only hang out with the awesomest.
All right. Everybody, I'm glad you're here. Do us a favor. Tell your friends. Those of you who are on Spotify and Apple and Stitcher, dang it. Whatever. Share it. Help us get the word out. Jess Pettitt, you're my dream boat. You're awesome.
You're a dreamboat with donuts.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds very complimentary. I'm taking it as a compliment. Everybody be good to each other. Stay curious. Ask questions. Be kind. I think we'll be able to get through almost everything if we do those things.
100%.
Thanks, everybody.